Thanks for joining us on The World Now. Let's bring you the latest update from the UK. King Charles III and Camilla, the Queen Consort, are in Northern Ireland as part of a tour for the United Kingdom. They met crowds at Hillsborough Castle ahead of a meeting with political leaders. This comes as the Queen's coffin lays in the Edinburgh Cathedral for onward movement from 5 p.m. to London. It will be taken to Buckingham Palace and then to Westminster Hall, where the Queen will lie in state for 4 days. A national minute of silence has been announced for 8 p.m. on Sunday, the very night before the Queen's funeral in Westminster Abbey on Monday, the 19th of September. We have more details in this report.
As part of a tour of the United Kingdom, King Charles III is in Northern Ireland for his first visit as monarch. Accompanied by Camilla, the Queen Consort, his plane touched down at Belfast City Airport. The couple then travelled to Hillsborough. The castle, the only royal residence in Northern Ireland, has been a focal point for floral tributes. After greeting the crowds outside Hillsborough Castle, King Charles III is now holding a private audience with the newly appointed Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Chris Heaton-Harris. Later, Prime Minister Liz Truss will join the royal couple for a service in St. Anne's Cathedral, Belfast. Rehearsals have been taking place in London for the lying in state of the Queen, which will begin tomorrow. Monday evening, King Charles III was joined by his siblings, Princes Andrew and Edward and Princess Anne, as they briefly held vigil around Queen Elizabeth II's coffin. The royal family mounted their guard of the coffin at St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, Scotland, where it will lie until Tuesday evening. Queen Elizabeth's coffin is draped in the royal standard in Scotland and dressed with a wreath of flowers, which includes dried white heather from Balmoral. The Princess Royal's appearance makes her the first woman to be part of the vigil, which has until now been carried out by only male members of the royal family. Thousands of people queued through the night to file past the Queen's coffin, which stands on public view for 24 hours at St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh to pay their respect. According to guidance issued by the Scottish Government, the cathedral will remain open to the public overnight.
It is another kettle of fish in Thailand, where a Thai court sentenced a political activist to 2 years in prison for insulting the monarchy after the activist was judged to have dressed as Queen Suthida during a street protest. The 25-year-old was found guilty of intentionally mocking the monarchy by her actions during a Bangkok street protest in 2020. It is a crime in Thailand to defame or insult the king, queen, heir or regent, with punishments of up to 15 years in prison under what are among the world's strictest laws. According to the legal aid group, the Lawyers for Human Rights, which tracks such cases using police and court records, she's one of the latest at least 210 activists who have been charged with royal insult in the last 2 years, related to protests calling for reform of the powerful monarchy. And back here in Africa, and now to Kenya, where William Ruto has been sworn in as the country's 5th post-independence president at a pomp-filled ceremony on Tuesday after his narrow victory in a tough but largely peaceful election. He took the oath of office under the watchful eyes of tens of thousands of people who joined regional heads of state at a packed stadium in Nairobi. Many spectators clad in Ruto's party's bright yellow cheered loudly, waving Kenya flags. According to Kenya police, the 60,000-seat stadium was already filled to capacity by 5 a.m. Several people were injured as crowds tried to force their way into the site, crushing themselves at one of the entrances. Taking the oath of office, the new president said William Ruto, a highly ambitious politician who had been deputy president since 2013, beat his rival Raila Odinga, who had been backed by outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta by less than 2 percentage points in the August 9th poll. Some of the challenges 55-year-old William Ruto would face include a surge in food and fuel prices, high unemployment, and rising debt.
To the implementation of the East African Community Treaty and its protocols of free movement of people, goods, and services. Equally important is our commitment to the full actualization of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya will continue playing its role in international diplomacy at the bilateral and multilateral levels, appreciating that we are host to major international agencies, including the United Nations.
And joining me virtually here in Lagos to discuss the fallout from the Kenya election is Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies, David Awarawo. Good to have you join us, Professor Awarawo.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just start from that ceremony there. Former President Uhuru Kenyatta handed over the instrument of power to William Ruto, and let's remember there was a fallout between both men in the second term in office. But while he was giving his speech, I was fascinated by his statement William Ruto made, where he said, "A village boy has become president." Talk to us about how significant that moment is, especially when you look at the fallout from in the second term, the election, and now the inauguration itself.
Yes, William Ruto represents everything that Kenyans look forward to for the transformation of their country. First, it does not belong to one of the dynasties, so to speak, either the Kenyatta or the Odinga, any of them. A village boy who didn't have anything, who struggled his way through, and then became a politician, and then rose to become deputy president. He represents everything that Kenyans look forward to in the individual that will transform the country. He has done virtually everything right so far. First, he says he won't go after anybody. He shouldn't go after anybody, really. Kenya has too many problems to contend with than for him to focus on anybody to start pursuing. If anybody has done wrong, the law will take his course, not because Ruto would go after the person. He has also sought to build, consensus. He has told everybody to come on board, that there is no us and them, so that the problems of Kenya can be tackled and Kenya can, be at par with other countries, developed countries of the 21st century. He seemed not to have any bitterness in his mind, even though, Uhuru Kenyatta, whose deputy he was, didn't support him. And even though Kenyatta didn't want to see him for a long time, when Kenyatta eventually decided to see him, you could see that he didn't exhibit any bitterness, in the way he has interacted so far. So William Ruto seems to represent everything that Kenyans look forward to in the man that will transform their country. All we can hope is he will, he will maintain the momentum, keep to the promises he has made, and Kenya will be the better for it if he's able to, keep to all the things he has said, and if he's able to continue the way he has carried out, his activities so far.
And you were right to mention the two political dynasties, the Odingas and the Kenyattas. And he seemed to have fallen out with both political dynasties. Kenyatta only congratulated him just a day before this inauguration. Odinga did not attend. He said he did not believe that the election was free and fair. But Ruto has said that he will extend an olive branch to his opponent, but he will not do a handshake, as we saw in 2018 between Odinga and Kenyatta. How likely is he to fare in terms of bringing in dissenting voices?
That would be a big challenge, because especially for Odinga, Odinga seems to be, dissatisfied with the way the whole thing has gone so far. He seems to believe that he won the election and not Ruto, and he seems to, hold the view that his mandate has been stolen. And given the fact that Odinga will not likely contest again when you look at his age. He's on the second half of the 70s, going towards 80. By the time Ruto will complete his term, it will be impossible for Odinga to come. So especially for Odinga. For Kenyatta, he has had his time, so there won't be, I don't think it will be so difficult for Ruto to reconcile with him and forge ahead. But for Odinga, the animosity seems inveterate. And he has a huge assignment on his hands to be able to bring Odinga on board. Especially when you look at the result, as you have just mentioned, just 2 points, difference, which means that Kenya is almost split into two halves. And he needs the other half to be able to do well. When a country does not have stability, when a country is, perpetually in conflict, development and progress, will take the back seat. So Ruto will need to do everything within his power to ensure that, he brings in Kenyatta, which I think will be easier, and of course also bring in Raila Odinga, so that all of them can join hands together to move their country forward.
And in a situation where that doesn't happen, where the animosity towards him continues, because if you remember, it might just be a campaign statement, but Odinga did, Kenyatta did say that Ruto wasn't fit for office. And in a situation where that animosity continues, does that make it difficult for him to navigate the terrain, and that's Ruto, and manage the task ahead of him?
Yes, it will be difficult. If he tries everything and the two political bigwigs remain, maintain their position and refuse to, work cooperatively with him, it will be difficult, but not impossible. There is a way we'll carry on. What he needs to do is to be inclusive. Beyond Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, millions of other Kenyans in all the other ethnic groups, the Kikuyu, his own ethnic group and all that. If what he needs to do is to set up a government that will be inclusive, and all his policies too must reflect inclusiveness. If it is not to Raila Odinga, it's not Uhuru Kenyatta, but people from all the ethnic groups, people from all the different groups within the states, the country, and he does not do anything to suggest that he is running the government of us and them. Even if these two, fail to come to work cooperative with him, you have the large majority of Kenyans, being part of his government and doing their part to ensure that Kenya develops. If that happens, the refusal of both of them to work with him cooperatively will not, pose a major obstacle to Ruto's ambition, to bring development to Kenya. And that is what we suggest Ruto does. He should be inclusive. He should bring everybody on board. He should ensure that nobody is left behind. The fiscally challenged, women, and not, the ethnic groups across. If he does that, even if the two don't work cooperatively with him, he will still be successful as Kenyan president.
Interesting times ahead in Kenya, whether it's the enthusiasm and expectations of the people and the grievances of his opponent. We will continue to watch out how things play out. Thank you so much for talking to us, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies, David Awarawo.
Thank you for having me.
We are staying in Africa, where a hospital official says an air raid has wounded one person in Mekele, the capital of Ethiopia's embattled Tigray region. There was no immediate comment by Ethiopia's federal government, which has been fighting Tigray's regional government since November 2020. The business campus has allegedly been hit by drones. Some people are accusing the Ethiopian government of being behind the air raid. And now to our coverage of the war, Russia's war in Ukraine. President Zelensky has called on the West to speed up deliveries of weapons systems as troops move to consolidate control over the northeastern territory seized back from Russia. Since Moscow abandoned its main hold in northeastern Ukraine on Saturday, marking its worst defeat since the early days of the war, Ukrainian troops have recaptured dozens of towns in a shift in battleground momentum.
Ukrainian troops have made more gains, pushing all the way to the northeastern borders in some places. They claim to have captured many Russian soldiers as part of a lightning advance that forced Moscow to make a hasty retreat. A spokesperson for Ukrainian military intelligence said Russian troops were surrendering en masse as they understood the hopelessness of their situation. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Monday that while it was still early days in the counter-offensive, Ukrainian forces had made significant progress. As blue and yellow Ukrainian flags floated over newly liberated towns, The Ukrainian military said it had freed more than 20 settlements in 24 hours. The territorial shift marked one of Russia's biggest reversals since its troops were turned back from Kyiv in the early days of its invasion on February the 24th. After months of little discernible movement on the battlefield, the momentum has lifted Ukrainian morale and provoked real public criticism of Russian President Vladimir Putin. It is not yet clear if the Ukrainian blitz could signal a turning point in the war, as momentum has switched back and forth before, but rarely with such a big and sudden swing. The speed of Ukraine's fight back has apparently caught Russia's military off guard, bringing swaths of territory Moscow had controlled for months back into Kyiv's fold. The retreat of Russian troops in recent days has drawn weeping and relieved locals into bomb-cratered streets, including on Sunday in the strategic but heavily damaged town of Izium. In Kharkiv, the capital of the region where the gains have been made, authorities said power and water had been restored to about 80% of the region's population, following the widespread outages. The buoyant mood was also captured by defiant President Zelensky late on Sunday on social media.
All right, joining me now from Minneapolis in the United States is to discuss the Russian-Ukraine war is a global affairs analyst, Kunle Falowo. Good to have you join us.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, everyone has been following this war. Not everyone, at least most people have been following the war in the past 6 months. And one can say that this is a significant setback for Russia in terms of the territories that have now been retaken by Ukraine. And I just want to ask you if you think that this is a turning point in this war.
Yes, it's definitely a turning point for not just the Ukrainians and the military personnel of Ukraine. It's also for the Western allies. It shows that the tons of money and funding and in terms of ammunitions and weapons and training has not gone to the drain. It shows that it is actually working. We're seeing progress in that region. It's interesting to note that the northeastern region that was retaken by the Ukrainian military personnel is twice the size of London. And that's a huge deal because they would have been able to achieve this feat without the Western support and the shared determination of the people of Ukraine.
Mm. But Russia is not also taking this lightly. We saw, while they have been majorly silent on this, but we saw a statement coming in from a Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, where he said, and I just want to quote, he said, the special operation is underway and we will continue that we have set until, we'll continue until that which we have set are achieved. And what direction do you think that this is likely to go now? Are we likely to see more offensive coming from Russia?
Well, to start with, going into the war over 6 months ago, the Russians had thought that it would be a walk in the park. They had felt that they overestimated their ability to take over Ukraine because they were able to annex Russia in 2014 without any resistance from the Ukrainians, and they felt like they would just go into Ukraine and just take over the country. Unfortunately, they underestimated the people of Ukraine. And also, let me remind our listeners and watchers, viewers, that when you talk about numbers, there are more amounts of people, military personnel on the Russian side than the Ukrainian side. So meaning that the willpower lies with the side of the Ukrainians, and when you talk about strength and military numbers, it lies with the side of the Russians. But that's not the way war works. Obviously, we've seen it now that numbers don't really matter. At the end of the day, if we have a good amount of people and a good amount of direction and focus and determination and support, things will get done. And let's not also forget that the Russians are not saying this is going to be over. This is ongoing, and there's still going to be another counter-offensive Of course, we're seeing counteroffensive from the Ukrainian side, but the Russians have been pulling this since 6 months ago. So to say that the war is far from over, is really not over. And then we should be expecting some sort of surprise from the Russian side.
And we're seeing calls for, in Russia, calls for President Putin to step down. And those calls are coming from some local political groups in that country. Do you think that as this war continues, that because the narrative in Russia has been quite different, Russian media has been well controlled by Kremlin, but do you think that as the war continues, that this kind of calls will gain traction?
Every dissident in Russia and everybody who is seen as opponent of the Russian president in the past, we know what happens to them. It's either they get disappeared or you don't hear from them afterwards, or they get thrown in jail. There's thousands and thousands of human rights violations and abuses and all that coming in from the Russian side, especially from the oligarchs. So all of those little talks here and there, it's still going to be ongoing, but it does really little to persuade or dissuade the Kremlin from doing what they are setting out to do.
Thank you so much for talking to us. It was a pleasure. Global Affairs Analyst Kunle Falowo.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
To the Middle East, where the Pakistani government says it could take up to 6 months for deadly flood waters to recede in the country's hardest hit areas, as fears rise over the threat posed by waterborne diseases, including cholera and dengue fever. Floods caused by record monsoon rains and melting glaciers in Pakistan's northern mountain regions have so far claimed the lives of more than 1,400 people and affected an estimated 33 million more, washing away homes, roads, railways, livestock and crops. Damages are now expected to total more than $30 billion, triple that of an earlier estimate of around $10 billion. Karachi is seeing an outbreak of dengue as hundreds and thousands of patients are reporting daily at government and private hospitals. The dengue cases this year are 50% higher than last year's figures, with about 584,246 people in camps throughout the country. Health officials say the crisis could wreak havoc if unchecked. Rising floodwaters also remain a risk. The meteorological forecast indicating continuous rainfall is expected to stretch through September.